So one question that's been asked me, why are you taking on another full-time job? I've had a medical practice in Montana since 1991, so for over 30 years, I love my job, I love my staff, I love my patients so much. And so people have asked me, how are you going to take care of your patients and do this PSC job? And here's how. I've got this all lined out. All right, for one thing, I really do spend 2 to 3 hours a night preparing the charts for the next day for my patients. Instead of doing that, I'm going to shift that to the weekend. So that's 10 to 15 hours is going to be shifted to the weekend. And there's another more significant information piece of how I'm going to do that. In 2021, there were so many people that fled the medical system here that I could not keep up with new patients coming in. I devoted myself to seeing as many new patients as I could that were fleeing the system, people that wanted a doctor that would be honest with them. I took care of as many as I could, and I actually had to turn away close to 200 patients that wanted to come and see me. So I dedicated myself to that. And after I filed, I stopped seeing new patients, and at this point, I'm down to 3.5 days a week. So new patients, they take a lot more time. There's usually, not always, but there's usually a thick chart that you need to analyze. I spend 2 hours with new patients. And then usually, unlike my patients where it's really fine-tuned and we have close contact with each other, in a lot of other situations, I'm not saying all, but there's a lot of times a lot of things that need to be kind of cleaned up and taken care of. So the new patients are really very, very time-consuming. It went that quickly down to 3.5 days. And I've historically done Saturday clinics when the need arises. I stayed last week to see somebody as late as 7:30, and I've seen people as late as 10:30 at night. So I accommodate my patients' needs. And so sometimes, especially if I need to go to Helena to testify for the babies or for guns or something, and my patients have to be rescheduled. We oftentimes have only 3 days notice. Sometimes 5 days, but usually only 2 to 3 days notice before we need to go down and testify for or against a bill. And so those patients have to be rescheduled, and they've been putting up with me with that for years, and my staff too. And so, and then as far as rescheduling, tomorrow's an example. I need to go to Polson, and then I've got a pro-life Zoom meeting in Helena, and my staff, my wonderful staff, rescheduled. I mean, my patients and my staff are very generous and very giving. So that is how I'm going to be able to do it. It looks to me like PSC will be more than full-time. It's the job is largely doing research on topics that are on the upcoming docket for their once-a-week meeting, and also being available to your constituents and being available to the legislators. I do research every day anyway, after I'm done seeing patients, and contact with people is my thing. I like grassroots. Contact with people is my thing, whether it's the people out there, the constituents, the legislators. Not that the legislators aren't people, but so I plan. We've got great legislators. I plan to be in Helena at least 2 days a week and more as the need arises. I will not abandon my patients. There's no way. I've told them there's no way I will abandon them. I've never shortened time with my patients. I spent ample time with my patients, 1.5 hours for physicals, hour for follow-ups. I've never shortened my time with a patient. I don't. Nor will I ever shorten my time with PSC. So rest assured I can do this. Kind of excited about it. So I want to interject something that's going to seem a little bit like a side story, but it's actually not. So if you could please just kind of bear with me as I attempt to answer a question that's been posed to me more than once. It's like, how does energy independence for Montana relate to your other areas of advocacy, like for the unborn, for gun rights, for medical freedom? And so I think they all fit together perfectly, and with a brief explanation, I think you'll understand what drives me. From my early 20s, I've had passion for pro-life and for gun rights. Early 20s, started with my first pregnancy. So guns and babies, that's been my thing for over 40 years. And then as I came over time to see what was happening with the elders and how the elders were being degraded and tossed aside, I added the cause of protecting seniors. And when I saw patients' rights being infringed upon, I took on that. So this is just kind of what I do for fun. And the last 5 to 6 years, we've seen the shutdown of much of Montana's natural resources, and including those that produce power. and it gets too cold here to be without reliable, dispatchable power. So I've added that to my list of passionate advocacy. So many of you here know, maybe most of you, if not all, that there's an adversary that's waging war against God and mankind. That devil is a liar and a murderer who seeks to degrade, enslave, and destroy mankind. God's word says mankind is the pinnacle, the high point of his creation. Now, when I look at myself or look in the mirror, think about myself, that seems really hard to believe. But really, God, we are the pinnacle of God's creation. He places us above the angels. So, and I live by faith and not by sight. So we are the pinnacle of God's creation. It's a fact. So when we fight for the dignity of all humanity, from conception to natural death, when we fight for the God-given right to defend ourselves and to bodily integrity, what medically goes in and out of our bodies and those kinds of things, when we defend God's law of liberty, we are battling God's adversary. And that is the number one general category. All these things that I do for advocacy all fall in that same category. So I get excited to fight God's adversary, the devil. To me, that's how I kind of connect everything together, and that's really what drives me.